Their voyage was the start of an adventure that led 175 years later to the creation of an independent African nation. It was the start of the Sierra Leone story. On April 27, 1961, a new nation was born. Its name, Sierra Leone. A former British colony and protectorate with its more than 2.5 million people, it is a land of contrasts, of isolated huts and air-conditioned hotels, of vast savannas and cloud-draped mountains, of tiny riverside settlements and cities like Freetown, which boasts the third largest natural harbor in the world. Hurrying to Freetown, the nation's capital, to celebrate Independence Day, were representatives of 65 nations, and of course, Sierra Leoneans themselves. They were coming to celebrate the day that a promise was kept. A promise by the British to prepare them for independence, a promise by the nation's leader, Sir Milton Augustus Margai, to lead them to independence. Sir Milton Margai, 65-year-old physician and graduate of the British University of Durham, was to be the first Prime Minister of the newly independent country. His foreign minister, the American-educated Dr. John Taffer Smart, an MD and an ordained minister. Among the first foreign representatives to arrive in Sierra Leone was Prime Minister Balewa of Nigeria and members of his government. Dr. Smart, who had once taught in Nigeria, spotted an old friend of his among the delegates. Sir Maurice Dorman, British colonial governor of Sierra Leone, his wife, and Sir Milton Margai later greeted the personal representative of the British Crown, the 25-year-old Duke of Kent, cousin of the Queen. The Duke's double assignment was to convey the Queen's personal best wishes to Prime Minister Margai and to transfer the instruments of sovereignty to Sierra Leone. The changing of the colors took place on the night of April 26th. At exactly 11:58½, the light on the British flag was turned off, and the green, white, and blue flag of an independent Sierra Leone unfurled for the first time. Later, the dances started. 1,200 dancers from all 11 major Sierra Leone tribes performed for an audience of 70,000. The next morning, the Sierra Leone Parliament was called into session, and Sir Maurice Dorman took the oath of office as Governor-General of the country. As Governor-General, he was no longer responsible to the British government, but rather to the representatives of the people of Sierra Leone. Next, the Duke of Kent handed the instruments of sovereignty to Sir Milton Margai. Sierra Leone, the 12th member of the British Commonwealth of Nations, was now officially independent. where Christian, pagan, and Muslim live side by side. This church was built by Americans. The congregation belongs to the Timni tribe. British and American Christian missionaries have worked in the colony and the protectorate since the beginning, just as Muslim missionaries have. Christianity came from the sea. Islam overland from North Africa. Today, the majority of the people are Muslim. Do tensions exist among them? Apparently not. In fact, the encouragement to build Christian mission schools has often come from the Muslims themselves. At a Muslim ceremony on Independence Day, this theme from the Quran was chosen as if to underline the need for cooperation. If ye are grateful, I will increase thee in power, knowledge, and blessing. But if ye are ungrateful, surely my wrath and punishment are severe and tormenting.
Although my country is a new country, having its birthday only on the 27th of April, yet this does not mean that we have not been for a long time interested in world affairs. We have not yet had an opportunity to formally pronounce on our foreign policy, but already the Prime Minister has given an indication of the two lines along which it will be built. The first line is naturally a line which is pertaining to our economic foreign policy. We hope to have an open door policy along economic affairs, because our country is one of those that are at the present time underdeveloped. We recognize that it is only the free flow of capital and technical ability that will help us. So we want our door to be opened to anyone who wants to come and help us with capital, with ability, with technical knowledge. Or in terms of non-alignment, as some of our African colleagues have said, we are going to take one step forward and say here is a new country that, like a child, though not in naivety like a child, but because it is our wish, we are going to be friendly to all countries until such a time as they reject our friendship.
I am Honorable Paramount Chief Madam Ella Koblo Gulama of Sierra Leone, the first and only woman member of Parliament. Now that our country has achieved independence, I think that the women of my country will be very much interested in more medical facilities, more schools, so that our children will become educated. In years gone by, we have suffered from more infant mortality, and the rate at which the death toll was going up was very high. And that for the past few years, our people have become very, very much interested in education. And there is the urge for people to send their children to school. A few years ago, while I was in the States on a State Department visit, wherever I went in America, I was asked a question about communism in my country. And at that time, I was hearing about communism for the first time. Now that our country has gained independence, I'm sure that outside people who are interested in communism will make it their business to interfere into our internal workings of our country. I, for one, and I'm speaking for the women folk of my country, will stand against any move to introduce communism in our country. We have far too many things to bother or to think about than communism. We hate interference, and we have been practicing democracy and hope to continue to practice democracy even after our independence. Next year, 1962, we hope to have a general election, and it will be the first time all women in Sierra Leone will be taking part in the voting for their representative. And I'm sure that the women are looking forward to that time when they could be well represented in the legislature of our country. After general elections or during the elections, we hope to campaign for as many women as possible so that we can capture as many seats in the legislature. For the simple reason, there are many, many things we'd like to fight for health facilities, for education, as I have just mentioned, and for other things, the freedom of women, especially in Sierra Leone. We think we want to have ample opportunities given to us and would like to take our place side by side with our men folk in Sierra Leone.
Many of the leaders in Nigeria and in Ghana have had their education in Freetown. So that Freetown's contribution has been a West African one and not a purely Sierra Leonean. But secondly, a country doesn't live by education alone. It's got to have a strong, viable economy. And it has only been within recent months, recent years, that the economy of Sierra Leone has built up to the point where they can confidently go ahead into the future.
During the last election, I made the election broadcast for my party, SLPP. And my promise to the electorate was that if they followed my government, I would lead them to independence within the lifetime of this House. The life of the House will expire next year, about July, or I might spring a surprise and arrange for election earlier. All I would want to do is to turn to electorate. I've done the duty which I promised you. This is what now let us go now to the electorate, and you'll decide what form of government you want.
Today we spoke to Dr. Ernest Eastman, a descendant of the emancipated slaves who had settled in Sierra Leone in 1787. We asked him about the early history of his country.
The colony of Sierra Leone was founded by several waves of people of African origin. The first set were slaves in the cities of England who had been freed by the judgment of Lord Chief Justice Mansfield in 1772. On being set free, their masters abandoned them, and they roamed about as itinerant vagrants, causing trouble to the poor law authorities of England. Granville Sharp and his friends, who afterwards were responsible for the abolition of the slave trade, 1807, the abolition of slavery, 1833, formed a society for the relief of poor blacks and collected all these former slaves now destitute in London. Some had been servants from the West Indies, not farm servants, but the house servants there were, and some were ex-soldiers from British regiments. They collected them to the number of about 411, and with the help of the British Navy, transported them to the Sierra Leone River. There was no Freetown in those days, and the land was bought from the Timini King and given over to the English government for the use of these